Hi everyone, today I'll be covering practice test number 1 non-calculator section. Feel free to go to the specific questions you got wrong or stick from the beginning all through the 20 questions since I will be giving tips and tricks along the way. So let's begin with number 1. If x minus 1 over 3 equals k and k equals 3, what is the value of x? So there's two pieces of information that they directly give you. So as long as you put the pieces together, this should be simple. So plugging in k equals 3. So x minus 1 over 3 equals 3 is our new equation. So multiplying both sides by 3 would give us x minus 1 equals 9. And in order to solve for x, we would have to add 1 on both sides, which brings us to the solution of 10, D10. The SAT math section gets exponentially harder, starting with the easier questions. So you would have to allocate your time properly because it is a time game to make sure that you make no mistakes, but still breeze through the first 10 questions so that you have enough time for some of the harder questions, which are the latter 10. All right, number 2. For I equals square root of -1, what is the sum of parentheses 7 plus 3i plus parentheses -8 plus 9i? So I equals square root -1 is actually knowledge that you should already know. This doesn't provide us extra information specific to this problem. In other words, you should not be plugging in I here because you won't get anything, you won't be getting anywhere. So instead, what you have to recognize is that we need to simplify this portion of the expression. So basically, 7 plus 3i minus 8 plus 9i. So 7 and -8, and then 3i and 9i. So combining these two together, we get -1 plus 12i. And in this case, there's nothing else to do except for the simplification of this expression, which brings us to our answer choice A. Okay, number 3. On Saturday afternoon, Armand sent M text messages each hour for 5 hours, and Tyrone sent P text messages each hour for 4 hours. Which of the following represents the total number of messages sent by Armand and Tyrone on Saturday afternoon? So in order to solve for this, all we have to do is total number of messages by Armand plus total messages of Tyrone. So how many messages did Armand send? It's M each hour for 5 hours. So how many did he send on that day? 5 hours times M, because that's how many he sent that per hour, right? And then for Tyrone, same exact logic, except for P. So 5M represents how much Armand sent, and 4P represents how much Tyrone sent. So to find the total would be 5M plus 4P, which brings us to answer choice C. Don't get caught up with the fact that it's M text messages each hour for 5 hours and let that confuse you. If you want to get into like the units, which will become helpful later on, you can think of it as M text messages per hour. And then it says for 5 hours, right? So when we multiply by 5 hours, the units of hours cancel out, and we get the number of text messages left, which is 5 times m. So 5m, which is why we conclude 5m plus 4p for this question. All right, number 4. Kathy is a repair technician for a phone company. Each week, she receives a batch of phones that need repairs. The number of phones that she has left to fix at the end of each day can be estimated with the equation P equals 108 minus 23D, where P is the number of phones left and D is the number of days she has worked that week. What is the meaning of the value 108 in this equation? So believe it or not, I know I read the entire question, but soon enough you'll get the eye to be able to skim through and identify which part of the question is actually important. In this case, the only part that is really important is this equation and what P is identified as and what is D identified as. And the most important part, what is it actually asking for? And it's asking for the meaning of the value 108. Okay, so When I do look at an equation like this, they try to confuse you. You should immediately recognize this question looks like the slope-intercept form, except they changed it slightly, right? So instead, and a reminder, the slope-intercept form being y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to go ahead and rearrange this equation so it looks exactly like this, which is p equals negative 23d plus 108. So all I did was switch up the negative 23d with a 108. So knowing this, it makes it much more simple because it's asking you, what is the meaning of 108? What is the meaning of b? And what is b in a y or slope-intercept form? It's simply the y-intercept, right? And what does y-intercept tell us? The y-intercept is located when x equals 0. So the definition of y-intercept is the value of y when x equals 0, right? So let's interpret this in this specific question. It's basically saying, what is the value of p when d equals 0, right? So recognizing that d is the x and p is the y. So it's asking me, what is the value of p? How many number of phones are there left when D is 0? She has not started to work on it that week. And if you take a look at the answer choices, B is the only one that makes sense. So it's the number of phones left, which is 108, when D equals 0. She has not worked on any yet, right? She has not worked for any days, so it's the start of the week, B. All right. Number 5, long expression that I will not read to save some time. All you have to understand is that you are distributing this negative sign to all three terms here. So if we were to rewrite this, we would get x squared y minus 3y squared plus 5xy squared, which I'm just copying the left side of this expression. And then now I'm going to apply that negative in the middle. So we have positive x squared y negative 3xy squared, positive 3y squared. From here, a lot of people can get confused. So I like to circle, underline, and then square the different terms so that I can combine like terms. So we have x squared y, and then we have another x squared y here. We also have a negative 3y squared, and we have a positive 3y squared. And then finally, we have a positive 5xy squared and a negative 3xy squared. So knowing this, I'm just combining like terms. So x squared y plus x squared y is 2x squared y. So I get rid of this here. Then we have the negative 3y squared plus 3y squared, which just cancels each other out. And then we finally have positive 5 minus 3, which is plus 2x y squared, which bring us to answer choice C. All right. Number 6. So there's an equation of h equals 3a plus 28.6. It tells us that h is the height of a boy in inches, and then a is the boy's age between the ages of 2 and 5. Based on this model, what is the estimated increase in inches of a boy's height each year? If you completely understood the previous question, I think it was number 3 or number 4, about how slope-intercept form is being used, you should be able to answer this question. So it's understanding what is the estimated increase in inches of a boy's height each year. So what is the estimated increase in inches, which is h, over each year, which is a? Simply put, the more exposure you get to these type of questions, you'll understand this basically means slope. It's asking for the change in y over the change in x. So a slope, in order to find slope, the equation is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This is also known as change in y over change in x. And this is essentially in word form what this question is asking for. It's asking for the change in h over the change in a, right? Which in our case, this is y and this is x. So if this immediately clicks for you, you should be able to get to the answer choice A. If it doesn't, you can solve through it logically. So the other way to solve this is to actually plug in the numbers. So we can plug in a equals 2 and then plug in a equals 5. So when we plug in a equals 2, we get h equals 6 plus 28.6, which is just 34.6. Same thing here, h equals 15 plus 28.6, which is just 43.6. So knowing this, if we're finding the estimated increase for each year, we would have to take the difference of these two, so the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this is the y value, so y2 here, y1 here. So we get y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And when you solve this, you get the same value as the slope, which is a. So either way works, but understanding this translation of this word to slope will be very important because this is a very common topic on the SAT. All right, number 7 has a very big formula followed by how the monthly payment M is with the loan of P dollars at R%. All this information, again, I would ignore. If you have a complicated equation, I would go straight to the main question, which says, which of the following gives P in terms of M, R, and N? So all it's asking for is rearrange this equation so that I have the value of P. That's all it's saying, because obviously M, R, and N are in the equation, so I'm just solving for P. So the easiest way, like I would want to approach this question, is understanding that I want to isolate this variable, right? So the first thing that I would do is multiply this bottom value on both sides. So what I get is 1 plus r over 1,200 to the n power minus 1 multiplied by m is equal to this remaining portion here. And then from here, I should be able to recognize, oh, I just need to divide by that numerator on top, and then we can find P. So I would divide by this value here. So we have parentheses r over 1,200, 1 plus r over 1,200 to the nth power multiplied by m is equal to P. I know this may be a little complicated way that I just explained it, but this is basically on its own. It's multiplied by P. P is also known as like a numerator, P over 1. So all I'm doing is multiplying the denominator on both sides and then dividing by the numerator on both sides. And that will give us M multiplied by the denominator divided by that numerator up top, which brings us to answer choice B. Okay. Feel free to pause if needed, or else number 8. If a over b is equal to 2, what is the value of 4b over a? So again, there's many ways you can solve this. For me, I try to compare these two expressions and see like, how do they compare to each other? What kind of operation can I do from a over b to this value? Right? Because as long as I figure that part out, I know, because I know this value, I can figure it, what this is actually equal to, right? So the first thing that I immediately recognize is that it's a over b, but the question is asking for b over a, right? So I need to flip this somehow. So the easiest way for me to do that is actually taking this and concluding that b over a equals 1 over 2, right? If this doesn't make sense intuitively to you, another way to approach this is that a over b is equal to 2 over 1, right? So you can hypothetically think that A is equal to 2 and B is equal to 1 and flip it that way. So we know that B over A is equal to 1/2 now. And then the only operation we have to do from B over A to become 4B over A is to multiply it by 4. So essentially, 4B over A is going to be this multiplied by 4, which is 2, which is our answer choice C. All right, number 9. So we have two equations. It's a system of equations, and we're solving for it. I think a lot of people like to use substitution, but I highly recommend becoming more familiar with the elimination method because that seems to be the easier route for almost all of the system of equations questions that I've seen on the SAT math section so far. So I would get used to that for sure. So in this specific problem, I am going to make sure that the coordinate, values of the y are equal to each other. So basically, I'm going to multiply the bottom equation by 2. So copy down the first equation. And then I'm going to copy down 2y. Okay, I'm going to line the y's together. So we have positive 4y here. And then we have negative x multiplied by 2 at the top. So negative 2x. And then negative 19 times 2. So negative 38. And in order to eliminate the 4y's, since they are equal to each other, we would have to subtract both equations. So that gets rid of the 4y. We have 3x minus negative 2x. So in other words, 3x plus 2x. So we get 5x is equal to 15. Negative 2, negative 23 plus 38 is 15. Dividing by 5, we get x equals 3. And if you look at the answer choices, it's not necessary to look for the y value. If you want to double check, you can go ahead and plug it into either equation and you'll find that y is equal to negative 8. But since there's no two solutions with 3 as the x value, I would just put B as the answer there. For number 10, we have a function of g of x is equal to ax squared plus 24, and they tell us that g of 4 is equal to 8 and want us to find g of negative 4. So this is the given information here. So again, I'm going to use this and then plug it in. So basically, it's telling us that g of 4 is equal to a times 4 squared plus 24, which is 16a plus 24. And now I plug in this information that we know. So this is equal to 8. Therefore, we can solve for the a value by subtracting 24 on both sides. And we get negative 16 is equal to 16a. A is equal to negative 1. So in order to solve for g of negative 4, big one is C. If you notice, C has an answer choice of negative 1, and the SAT will always do that, but always remember what exactly you're solving for, which is the value of g negative 4. So instead, I would then have to plug it in. So g negative 4 is equal to negative 1 multiplied by negative 4 squared plus 24. And when you solve for this, you get negative 16 plus 24 is equal to 8, which is our answer choice A. All right, number 11. Again, two equations, system of equations. It's telling us that B is price per pound in dollars of beef. C is the price per pound in dollars of chicken. And X is the value of weeks after July 1st. And then it says, what was the price per pound of beef? So this is basically B, it's asking for. What is the price of B when it was equal to the price of C? Okay, so essentially it's telling us that B is equal to C and they want us to figure out what the price is, right? So there's B, there's C. So I'm going to try to eliminate as many variables as possible. So it makes sense for me to say, okay, 2.35 plus 0.25x is equal to 1.75 plus 0.40x. And so I'm going to subtract 1.75 and then subtract 0.25x. And basically this part is eliminated. So we have 0.6, this part is equal to 0.15x, which is this part. And when we solve for this by dividing by 0.15 on both sides, we get x equals 4. I almost made the mistake. It is not quite dollars because X is the weeks, but it's asking for the price per pound of beef, right? So we have to plug it back into this equation here. So B is equal to 2.35 plus 0.25 multiplied by 4, which is 2.35 plus 1, or 3.35, which is answer choice D. All right. Number 12, a line in the xy plane passes through the origin and has a slope of 1/7. Which of the following points lies on the line? So this origin is 0, 0. In other words, this part right here. And it's asking for which point lies on this line. So I would immediately think of what is the equation of this line is what I would actually think of. And it would be y equals slope 1/7x. And then I think, is there a y-intercept? And it's 0, 0, right? It passes through the origin, meaning that you don't really have to write that. But basically the equation is y equals 1/7x. Because when you plug in x equals 0, you get y equals 0 and vice versa. And so then I can look at these points and say which one satisfies this equation. And we'll see that D is the only one that makes sense, which is the answer. All right, number 13, if x is greater than 3, which of the following is equivalent to this expression? If all the time, if there's a condition where it says if blah, 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 I would hold on to it. Usually it's not important. And if it is important, it's important at the very end when you're making a decision of what the actual answer is. And this will make more sense as you get used to these questions. But essentially for now, all we have to do is focus on this expression and figure out how can I simplify this expression. So we have 1 over. So what I'm first going to do is ignore this top part for now and figure out this bottom part first. So I'm going to have a common denominator of x plus 2, x plus 3. Basically what I'm doing is multiplying this x plus 3 on top here and this x plus 2 on top here. So essentially we're getting x plus 3 plus x plus 2. Okay, this is simplified as x plus x and 3 plus 2, so we have 2x plus 5 over x plus 2 parentheses x plus 3. At this point, I actually don't want to forget that I have this 1 up top here that I've ignored, so I'm going to actually bring it into the equation now, since it doesn't look as complicated. So it should be 1 over 2x plus 5 over x plus 2 x plus 3. All this means is I can take the denominator and flip it, right? So basically this is equal to x plus 2 times x plus 3 divided by 2x plus 5. And I take a look at the answer choices right now, and it seems like this is going to be the most plausible, right? So I'm going to go ahead and multiply and FOIL the top portion, and you should get, when you multiply x plus 2 times x plus 3, you do get x squared plus 5x plus 6, which makes B the answer choice. All right, number 14. If 3x minus y equals 12, what is the value of 8 to the power of x divided by 2 to the power of y? Once again, this if condition is not that important. We are going to ignore it until we need it later, or if we do even need it, right? So I'm going to focus on simplifying this expression. And believe it or not, a lot of people struggle with this. When you have an exponent, you want to have the base equal to each other so you can simplify it. So basically, find some common ground between this 8 on top and this 2 on the bottom. And for me, I can immediately recognize that 8 is equal to 2 to the third power, right? So I'm going to replace this 8 with that. So we have 2 to the third power x, so don't lose that x that was at the exponent there, over 2 to the y power. This is the same thing as you can multiply the exponents on top, so you get 2 to the 3x power divided by 2 to the y power, right? Now I have the same base exponent, so it's numerator exponent minus denominator exponent when you have division, so it's equal to 2, 3x minus y. Now, this is the most simplest form you can get into, right? So this is the point where I'm like, but I need more information. I need something to be able to solve for this. And that's when I look at my if statement that tells us that 3x minus y is equal to 12. So I can conclude that 2 to the 12th power is the answer. Answer choice A. All right, number 15. If ax plus 2 multiplied by bx plus 7 is equal to 15x squared plus cx plus 14, and a plus b equals 8, what are the two possible values for c? Once again, I immediately think, okay, there must be a way to solve for this. So again, this is the if statement. So I'm actually going to be more concerned with this a value for a plus b equals 8 for now. So I know that a plus b equals 8. But I have to also think about what other piece of information do we know. And when we look at this equation about a and b, we notice that this times this is equal to this, right? I know the other portions might be a little confusing for now, but to keep it simple, ax times bx is the 15x squared. In other words, a times b is equal to 15, okay? I could also basically expand this and show this part for you. So the very first part is, so if I'm going to FOIL the left side of this equation, we get abx squared plus 7ax plus 2bx plus 14 is equal to 15x squared plus cx plus 14. And I love comparing the left side and the right side. It makes life easier. So we have the x squared, we have the x, and then we have the 14. So the 14 can immediately cross each other out. The other piece of information that we get is abx squared is equal to 15x squared. And that's what I was trying to explain earlier. This is why AB is equal to 15. And then the other portion of this is that 7ax plus 2bx is equal to cx. So another way to simplify this is 7a plus 2b is equal to c. So we have 7a plus 2b is equal to c. From here, we have 3 solid pieces of information. We should be able to solve for this. So if a plus b is equal to 8 and a times b is equal to 15, there's 2 different combinations that comes out of this, and you should think about that, which is a equals 5, b equals 3, or flipped, a equals 3, b equals 5. So what you can do with this information, it's asking for the 2 possible values of c, right? So we're going to take this information and plug it in to what we know is equal to c, right? So if we take the first set of possible solutions, we get 35 plus 6 equals c. And the second part, we get 21 plus 10 is equal to c. So we get 41 and 31, which brings us to answer choice D. So always when you're giving two sides with like different terms, I would try to compare the coefficients by multiplying everything out and simplifying everything, and then determining and comparing the left side and the right side of the equation. So number 16, if t is greater than 0 and t squared minus 4 equals 0, what is the value of t? I'm going to ignore this condition for now and solve for this. T plus 2, t minus 2 equals 0, t equals -2 and 2. And this is where I apply the information that t has to be a positive value. So the answer is 2. 17. So we have this graph and I'm going to label all the information they give me. So AB is 1,800. We have EB is equal to 1,400. BD is equal to 700. And CD is equal to 800. And they tell us AEB is equal to BDC or CDB. So that information is given there. And then it's asking us for the value of X. So this is basically, this information tells us that the left triangle and the right triangle are similar to each other. Basically, we can create a proportion to solve for this, to put it very simple. So in order to solve for X, I'm going to think of it simple. So there's this angle and this angle that are equal to each other. It should be proportionate to each other, right? So basically what I'm going to write is left of angle divided by right of angle. So the left of this angle E is X. The right of angle E is 1,400. And I'm saying that this should be equal to the left of angle D, which is 800. You have to understand that the triangle on the left is looking up, but the triangle on the right is looking down. So you have to account for that. So that's why the left side of this angle is 800 and the right side would be 700. And you can simply solve for this equation. So 700x is equal to 800 times 1,400. Or obviously this is way too complicated, so you don't even have to go through that. You can do 700 times 2 is 1,400. So 800 times 2 is x value, which is 1,600. All right. Number 18, we get two system of equations once again. Again, I encourage elimination method. So immediately this x and x are equal to each other. So it makes life very simple. We can just subtract the entire equation. So we cancel out x. We get y minus 2y, which is negative y. And then we get negative 9 minus negative 26, which is positive 16. So basically y equals negative 16, but it's looking for the value of x. So I'm going to plug it into the easier equation, which is the first one. So x plus negative 16 equals negative 9. X minus 16 equals negative 9. X is equal to 7 is what we can conclude. Brings on to number 19. In a right triangle, one angle measures x, where sine of x is equal to 4 over 5. Basically, sine of x is opposite over hypotenuse, SOHCAHTOA. And then it asks us, what is the cosine of 90 minus x? So this is a right triangle. So immediately if you're familiar with the Pythagorean theorem, you should immediately recognize that the left side is also 3x because 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. It is a special right triangle, 3, 4, 5. It's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. And knowing this, it's asking for cosine 90 minus x. And this is probably the hardest part, interpreting what does 90 minus x mean, right? And so in a triangle, there's 180 degrees. And this is resulting in 3 different angle measurements, right? Added up is 180 degrees. But specifically in a right triangle, we know that one of them is equal to 90 degrees, meaning that the remaining 2 angles are equal to 90 degrees. So we have x here, and then let's say y here. So basically x plus y equals 90 degrees is one way we can think about it. So it's asking you what is 90 minus x. So let's do 90 minus x is equal to y, right? In other words, when it says 90 minus x, it just means the other angle that is not the right angle, but is not x, which is this angle here, y. So if we're finding the cosine of this angle here, it's adjacent over hypotenuse, so we get 4x over 5x. In other words, we can say it's equal to 4 over 5, which is our answer. Number 20, if a equals 5 square root 2 and 2a equals square root 2x, what is the value of x? And so we can plug in this value directly into here. So 2 times 5 square root 2 is equal to square root 2x. 10 square root 2 is equal to square root 2x. I need to find this x, so we're going to square both sides. And we get 100 times 2 is equal to 2x. And divided by 2 gets x equals 100, which helps us finish the non-calculator portion of this. I will also be posting the calculator portion separately if you would like to follow through with me on the next video as well.